another Canada Helps webinar. My name is Cindy from the Canada Helps marketing team, and I'm so excited to be hosting the team from Thriving Nonprofits who are going to be discussing the topic nonprofit revenue diversification and what's possible. We have had a little change in our speaker lineup, but we're in great hands with Christy, who I'll be introducing and passing the mic over to shortly. Just before we do, I want to give a quick overview of what Canada Helps does. If you go to the next slide. Yeah. Perfect. This might be a refresher for some of you who are hopefully joining us again, and those of you that are new to Canada Helps. We ourselves are a charitable organization, and our whole mission is to increase giving and generosity in Canada through technology. For Canadians, we do this through offering a very comprehensive and flexible range of giving solutions. So any member of the public can donate or learn about any charity in Canada. And for Canada's 85,000 charities, Canada Helps provides affordable fundraising tools like brandable, embeddable online donation forms, our P2P fundraising platform, as well as educational opportunities like this webinar to help charities increase their impact. Since 2000, more than 5 million Canadians have donated over $3.7 billion to charities using Canada Helps. We actually surpassed a milestone earlier this year, and we need to update this stat as we have over $4 billion to charities donated earlier this year. Awesome. So next slide, please. A little bit of housekeeping. I know a lot of folks were asking whether they'll be able to review this material. Do rest assured that the recording and slide deck will be emailed to you following the webinar. So if you have to drop off for any reason or you're having some technical difficulty we're not able to resolve, you'll be able to watch it at your own pace. Hopefully you're able to hear us at this point, but if you are having any difficulties at any point, please put it into the question log, which should be an option on the top right-hand side of your window. And this also goes for if you're having any questions about the content, you can pop it into the question log and we'll be answering on the back end or collecting the questions for a Q&A session at the end. We've also received some of your pre-submitted questions that we've passed over to Christy. We're also joined by Rob Fisher from the Thriving Nonprofits team, so he might answer some of your questions in the chat log, and Sadie, my colleague, will also be supporting with any support that people require. So without further ado, I'm very excited to introduce Christy. Christy Rivet brings over 20 years of executive level experience in the nonprofit sector. And she is renowned for her expertise in organizational transformation, sustainable financial growth, and building community wealth. She has coached and empowered hundreds of nonprofits as well as for-profit impact businesses to achieve greater societal impact through diversified revenue, scaling programs, asset and real estate acquisition, social enterprise, partnerships, and investment. And she is actually one of the co-founders of Thriving Nonprofits, which was initially a local initiative in Victoria, BC. And over the past 3 years, she has scaled the Thriving Nonprofits Revenue Diversification Leadership Program across Canada and transformed it from a single program into one of the country's leading nonprofit and social enterprise innovation and learning hubs. So we're in great hands, even though there's been a slight change in the speaker lineup. I'm very excited to hand this over to Christy Rivet.
Thank you, Cindy. Welcome, everyone. I'm assuming you can all hear me. Yes? Okay, wonderful. Well, really excited to be here today, and we're going to dive into revenue diversification and how it can really help you create financial resilience in your nonprofit and charities. We'll use the language of nonprofits and charities interchangeably today, but really whatever we're talking about is allowed under the CRA for both nonprofits and charities. So our goal for today is for you to walk away with a clear understanding of why diversification really matters in our nonprofit sector today, and how it can help your organization increase your financial sustainability, retain those really talented staff and grow your overall impact. So today's webinar is going to be really fast paced. So I encourage you to take notes or jot down your ideas as we go through. So you have those ideas and considerations to take back to your organization once you also, as Cindy mentioned, will receive the webinar. So let's dive right in. I do want to take a moment to acknowledge that the themes we're going to cover today invite nonprofits to really think about financial resilience within a capitalist system. And this system has played a role in the challenges our sector is actually having to then work to solve. So our goal is to help you as a nonprofit leader understand how to use some different tools to build financial strength, redistribute resources, and create community-owned assets that over time really support a long-term systems change. So we also recognize that words like abundance may be rooted in privilege. So if you are fortunate enough to be a holder of privilege, we invite you, to really reflect on how you can use these kinds of strategies to uplift those who have been and continue to be marginalized. So with that in mind, I'm going to take a quick moment just to acknowledge the land I'm joining you from today. It's the unceded and ancestral territories of the Algonquin speaking peoples. They're now known as the Songhees and Esquimalt nations. And we take this time to acknowledge our presence on First Peoples lands as a fundamental first step in demonstrating respect, a commitment to relationship building, and an active support for the rights of Indigenous peoples. So super appreciate Cindy for introducing me. And so what do we do here at Thriving Nonprofits and why am I here? So as she said, I'm one of the co-founders. I'm the director of partnerships and programs. And at Thriving Nonprofits, we really help nonprofits across Canada and beyond to learn, to grow, to scale their impact through what I would call an interconnected 3-stage journey. And not all nonprofits need every stage, but this is the way we sort of see this passage of a journey has really been effective for a lot of nonprofits. So the journey begins, of course, with learning, right, and planning. And so that's why we offer workshops like this. We've had about 500 organizations in Canada have gone through, we have a flagship, I would say, a revenue diversification cohort program. And thousands of nonprofit leaders have taken our self-paced courses. So why? Why are they doing that? I'd say that most of our sector is looking to figure out how do you have the resources that you need to do the incredible, impactful work that you do. So if that's why you're here, you are in the right place. Each organization deserves to have a tailored revenue diversification action plan that really supports your unique goals, your capacity, and your mission. So let's just go quickly through it. The first step is learning. So that was it, right? Like our cohort program, and we have some self-paced courses on there. The second step of the journey that we find some organizations really value is support to put their plans that they come up with in the learning stage into action. So this can be done through tailored, bespoke consulting and coaching, whether it's adding a new revenue stream, modeling for a social enterprise, or acquiring an asset, or really simply getting the process started of figuring out how to bring in fee for service, or how to maximize your social enterprise that might not be making the revenue that you really hope it would, to bring a strategy into the next level of growth. So the Thriving Nonprofits leadership coaching, we've got planning workshops and direct consulting, and that really helps you make your plan into a reality and make that plan successful. So I would say the third infrastructure piece that we bring is investment. And so at first glance, maybe a somewhat unusual term for nonprofits to consider. But what this really means is connecting organizations with values aligned, flexible financing that you need to help launch revenue generating projects or purchase assets or something like that that you need capital to make an initiative move forward. So Thriving Nonprofits, it was originally founded by myself, Christy Fairholm Mater, and Lee Heron. So we've all been executive directors, senior staff, board members. And what we found as executive directors is that we were doing things a bit differently than some of our colleagues at the time. And so we really leaned into revenue diversification to actually increase the impact that we could have in our community and within our organizations for the people doing the work, whether that was from health and wellness benefits, appropriate pay, access to the technology they needed. So that really that lens of operational sustainability that it can be so difficult to fund through grants. So we found that using that combination of traditional and earned revenue strategies enabled our organization to create really long-term financial resilience and build community wealth through asset acquisitions. And this all led to greater impact for each of the communities we were serving. And so after seeing significant successes with these ideas and strategies, we came together and the idea of Thriving Nonprofits came about to really share these kind of knowledge, these tools we use, the expertise that we could bring for the whole sector. So at this point, it's now been informed by over 1,000 nonprofit leaders across our country. And so it's a real tight system. So we know that the power of the nonprofit sector can drive real systems level change. So we want to really ground this learning in a reminder of how vital this impact sector is, not only for our communities, but also to the wider Canadian economy. There's so much conversation about nation building. And so I think it's really important for us to land the power of the nonprofit sector into when we think about where the economy can go. So the nonprofit sector is 8.7% of Canada's GDP, right? That's more than agricultural sector, the retail sector, even in the gas and oil sectors, okay? Today, we know that 1 in 4 Canadians rely on charitable services. And so that might be access to a food bank, support for newcomers, or those facing barriers for employment, right? The reality is, even if you do not directly rely on a charitable service, the nonprofit sector touches our lives every day through arts and culture, sports, community services. The list just continues to go on. The sector is a huge employer, providing good quality jobs for millions across Canada. In fact, it's 1 in 10 people in our country work in the nonprofit sector, and the majority of those people are women. And of course, we know this, that the nonprofit sector provides social, environmental, cultural service in every one of our communities. So despite the importance of our sector to the social and economic fabric of this country, like resource constraint is a constant worry, right? Nonprofits are currently facing challenging fundraising trends that have been affecting our sector for several decades. So I just really want to be clear as we go on here. I hear so many nonprofit leaders sometimes think it's them doing something wrong or they should be doing something differently in their organization. This is really not an individual problem, individual organizational problem. This is really a system and a sector-wide problem due to trends that have been affecting us for so many years. So what are those trends, right? First, core funding, government contracts, they're getting harder to come by, and they have not kept up with inflation. So that means that organizations face the risk of suddenly losing, huge chunks of their operating budgets, and those reliant on revenue from existing contracts are forced to find ways to meet the rising cost of delivering their programs and service with, not enough resources. The number of nonprofits has grown exponentially. It's leading to this increased competition for grants funding, right? And funders themselves, they feel this pressure of this higher demand, right? So what do they do? Smaller grants for many organizations. Some have had to press pause on their grants to really think about it. So it's been a really interesting time. Grants and contract funding, it's increasingly less viable as long-term solutions for particular programs, right? We know it's often project-based or restricted to specific activities, and it rarely covers the full cost of delivering programs. That administrative, those staff wages, all those indirect costs, right? So our organizations are having to find ways to cover those costs themselves. Philanthropy giving is down overall, and there's been such a shift in donor trends over time, and that's affecting how nonprofits raise money, right? So changing donor demographics, giving priorities, emerging technologies, these all have an impact on our ability to raise resources. The way we engage, right, with people is also changing. We need new systems, platforms, technologies. They're really needed for these effective fundraising and engagement strategies. However, many of our organizations lack the unrestricted financial resources necessary to invest in growth in this area, to be able to afford all those pieces of technology and systems that they need. And so there's a risk of them being left behind. And this is happening at the same time as demand for services and programs are increasing. The challenges in our communities that they're facing are becoming more complex, and at the same time, demand is rising. So, of all of these trends, they have a profound impact, right? And many of the challenges nonprofits face today, it's really the results of this dependent financial model and many years of relying on this traditional financing model. So it just doesn't reflect the realities of today. Grants, donations, contracts, these are, and they're always going to be, critical part of how a nonprofit um, obtains that funding, right? They're critical to our sector. But in today's reality, in the shifting financial landscape, increasing needs of our communities, the complexities of these needs, most organizations can no longer rely on just those traditional fundraising strategies alone anymore. So the world has changed, and so our funding strategies need to change as well. So I love this quote by the Mowat Center for Policy Innovation because it really sums up, right? Charities and nonprofits rely on three cores of revenue: government funding, philanthropy, earned income. And of these three sources, only earned income offers any prospect for growth over the long time. So we're seeing that the more organizations rely only on traditional funding stream, the harder it's becoming for them to sufficiently cover their overheads, never mind being able to meet today's demands and invest in that long-term growth. So that's really why it's so critical for nonprofits to use revenue diversification. Can you guys hear that fire alarm? It's a test, I guess. So we're good. We're not moving. Um, So let's explore this just a little further. So, revenue diversification. Nonprofits write grants, you raise donations, get government contracts to obtain the financial resources needed to support your organization and services. But what's typical in our sector is that when we only have access to these restricted types of funding, our organizations keep running into the challenge of not having access to the right resources at the right time in the right amounts, right? And I'm sure, like many of you here today, you feel stuck and frustrated, not being able to move forward some great ideas and staff ideas of how to do it. So we really feel stuck with those limited resources, right? Not being able to start programs when your community needs it most, not being able to continue programs that are really effective because you don't have the grant funding around it, or worse, losing incredible staff, right? So inevitably, without other forms of revenue, your organization becomes to have less impact. On the other side, if we start to diversify our revenue, then we start to be able to have flexibility to think and operate differently. So that diversification is really about bringing in the resources you need. right? To grow your program, support staff, and increase overall impact. And what we have learned with working, 500 organizations going through our cohort program is that really using diversification actually increases your impact. So it's quite incredible. So it becomes this sort of place. What if we stop waiting for permission to grow? What if we generate our own resources in service of our mission that we can direct where we know is needed? So I've covered a bit of the why of revenue diversification. Now let's explore how and dive into it. So this image you see on the screen is what we call the Thriving Nonprofits Honeycomb. It's a revenue model for nonprofits and charities that contain 9 different types of revenue and economic streams that organizations can attract or develop. You see the darker green ones, they're more the traditional strategies, but it's looking at them in new ways. This middle green, I would say, are earned income strategies. And the darker blue ones really represent assets and partnerships and leverage. And leverage is really thinking through your operations and how do you effectively align more closely with the dollars you're already spending to increase your impact. So most organizations, you're using 2 or 3 of these strategies, but the key to revenue diversification is strategically layering in more and more of the revenue streams that support your unique objectives, capacity, and mission, and that you get to direct where those resources go. So the motto, you can see that having a variety of diverse revenue streams within a single organization, right? It helps you actually be able to stabilize and focus on your mission. Whereas sometimes when we really heavily rely on grants, it leads to mission drift. It also allows us to continually grow, right? Stable long-term funding. I would say one thing that I think is really important is that when we go through moments, we've seen the pandemic, these moments that are beyond our control, when one revenue stream goes down, another one rises. And so you have an approach that can just keep your organization really stable and on its core mission. So I really think about, you can think about your current streams. Where's your funding come from? How much control do you have of the money that you spend? I'd say that our left side here, our more traditional ones, give us less control. The ones on the right side give us more control of how we direct those resources, right? So let's dive into how to sort of think about it. So because we're starting to introduce new ideas about how we generate revenue, the foundation for successful revenue diversification is the ability to understand your organization's existing culture and beliefs when it comes to money. So we always begin with culture. In fact, we embed it throughout the whole entire program. Because without a mindset shift, even the best revenue plans run the risk of really just never seeing daylight or not being fully integrated into your organization. So, we as a sector, we tend to historically carry a number of limiting beliefs about money that can sometimes prevent us from being able to open the door to new types of thinking that are needed to explore the opportunity to develop different types of revenue. It's important to ask ourselves, right? Have we been intentional about our strategy? What can we do to really help shift the strategy? Right. So keeping that in mind, I always like to do a really quick exercise, and you can do this, right now or in your own time. I always like to think about what is the single biggest limiting belief your organization has about money. It might be we shouldn't charge fees for programs or services. Any type of financial risk is bad, right? It might be money is scarce or really hard to come by, right? Take a moment, just even 30 seconds. And what is that single most limiting belief about money in your organization? Okay, you got it? Awesome. Now, imagine if it was possible if you were able to turn that limiting belief into an empowering one. So flip it. How do you change that? So maybe it's understanding that you can charge fees while still ensuring your program remains accessible to those who need them, right? Or maybe it's you can be open to taking smart, calculated risk to test out new ideas that might bring in new resources. Or maybe it's that money is actually abundant, so long as you know where to look and how to access it. So this is how we start to, think inside our organizations. How do we change this culture of money and our belief system? It's sort of like that growth mindset thinking, right? You need to be able to think to become, think entrepreneurially, to adapt and thrive, right? Einstein said, we can't solve the problems with the same thinking we used when we created them. So we don't necessarily always think of ourselves as entrepreneurials. So maybe they're kind of put on this side here, entrepreneurial startup, business, whatever. But now today in our leadership, we're really coming from that social and environmental, cultural caring side, but also having this entrepreneurial thinking embedded into our organization to be able to be applied in any kind of context or thinking or working towards. So that growth mindset where is I'm not static. I'm not just not good at math. It's whatever I practice, I get really good at. So entrepreneurial thinking is really important. This growth mindset thinking. They take calculated risk. They resource new programs and current new ones. This is what this kind of growth mindset, the ability to adapt and think and try new things. And to really see that failure is just part of the process. Like some things will work and not everything will work, and that's okay. So this mindset and how you shift that culture in your organization is throughout the program. So we're going to explore each strategy in the honeycomb. Okay. So as we move on to earn revenue opportunities, let's just pause and touch base on the other big factor for successful revenue diversification. So remember, the first one was about thinking about those limiting beliefs about money. The second is creating a healthy appetite for risk. So one challenge that can arise in nonprofits that want to become more entrepreneurial is that when there are different risk appetites or risk cultures between different groups, the board and the executive director, or the team, the executive team and members of the staff, if you have different perceptions of that, you really need to just think it through and like put in some strategies to solve it, right? So how do you manage risk? How do you current appetite? How can start to build small steps of risk into your organization? And culture change doesn't happen overnight, but it's by creating that positive organizational culture towards it, towards money and risk, is an investment that will repay itself many, many times over as you begin to integrate revenue diversification in your organization. So, with that in mind, let's think about earned income. So, a good place to start is always exploring the opportunity to charge fees for the programs and services and expertise your organization currently offers, or by considering introducing something new with a fee attached. Again, culture change and embracing growth mindset is key here. Many nonprofits struggle with the idea of setting prices. So, do you know the biggest psychological challenge is going from offering programs and services for free to charging any amount of money at all, even putting out a donation charge? So, it's harder to go from 0 to 1 to 1 to 2. So, I would say those limiting beliefs come in here, right? When it comes to charging fees, it's important to acknowledge, recognize that this can challenge underlying and long-standing beliefs. both internally and externally. And I would say when we are in the cohort, we find that this place here of starting to charge fees is really where we come up with our traditional belief system and back into it that we're not supposed to. But there's many ways to think about it. So it might be that it can raise concerns about accessibility, these kind of thoughts. Well, how do you ensure that it never does, right? It also may bring out concerns about reputation, about how your organization is perceived by the community. And there might be very, very important reasons why the idea of charging something for a particular program just doesn't make sense. And that's okay. It's looking at all your programs as a whole onto what is possible, or where is it possible to think about other people that are trying to access. A lot of people use grants for their fee-for-service programs, and it's really thinking about sometimes what are the other markets that are interested in our services. Our grant really supports the renters, but what about the homeowners? Do they need the same services, or charge a fee that then can go back and supporting the community that you want to be able to offer it for free for? There's lots of different ways to think about fee for service. But the harsh reality is, and I'll just be Cree, is that nothing is ever really free, and someone always has to pay. So this means if your existing funding doesn't cover the cost of delivering your program and services adequately, then your organization is the one that will end up paying in the long run. So having your organization cover the ability to cover these costs by different ways of charging fees is very important, or your organization starts to concave and do without, and it's a trend we see that limits our ability to grow in the sector. So why should we charge fees, right? Is really thinking about what we've noticed is that every time that when organizations do charge fees, they're able to enable other people to engage in their services, which means that they're able to increase their impact. So the good news is there's many creative ways. 2, 4, 6, 8 are listed right here, the way we think about it. And we really just walk through, as you're going through cohort program, for an example, you really think about how do you set fees without compromising accessibility? How do you leverage your expertise to access new people that might want to pay for your service in new markets, and those ones that can afford to pay? So let's shift into social enterprise. I'm going to go through these quickly. It's another strategy you can consider for earned income. Like fee for service, social enterprise is more of, it can be a complex revenue strategy that begins to challenge traditional nonprofit thinking and culture. So a social enterprise, what is it? It's a business that sells goods or services with the key distinction that its purpose is to create environmental, social, or cultural impact. And any profits are and the majority of profits are reinvested directly back into the mission. So it can be the social enterprise model can be embedded in many familiar business types. The key question with the strategy is whether operating something like a thrift store, cafe, retail shop, service business could advance your mission while generating unrestricted revenue to reinvest in your organization. So when it comes to nonprofit, when it comes to social enterprise, it can take many different forms. There's no one size fits all. So what matters most is alignment, financial viability, capacity to succeed, and leadership buy-in. Okay. For an example, it could exist within your organizational structure. It can exist as its own organization, or it can exist as an outside of your organization and you own it. So a nonprofit can own a for-profit business. So if you're exploring social enterprise as a revenue strategy, it's also worth asking the question, why start a social enterprise when you can buy one? So it's interesting when you start to look at the types of social enterprises that nonprofits are starting. Many are what I would call Main Street businesses, right? So you'd see those in most communities. They might be cafes, grocery stores, laundromats, and many others of these type of businesses. So If you're thinking about social enterprise and wondering about startup or acquisition, think in your head, is your social enterprise being created to create the revenues that just will go back into your organization, right? Because maybe you want to acquire something. Or is it that it's something brand new and then you have to go through a startup phase? Especially in today's world, we have a massive transfer of, I would say, businesses in these next 5, 10 years as the baby boomers retire. And so it's a real opportunity for nonprofits to look at acquisition to keep those Main Street businesses in our community, especially in our rural and remote communities where those core community businesses are so important. Um, and acquiring allows you to skip ideation, testing, launch, that comes with that startup approach. So it's really, it's about thinking. So that social enterprise, it's not a short-term strategy. It requires capital, capacity, and time, right, to succeed. So thriving nonprofits learning, coaching, consulting can support you to access whether this strategy is the right fit for your organization and how to bring it to life and have that transition. One is a great one. I'll throw in a few examples here. The Immigrant Education Society, Calgary-based organization. They took Thriving Nonprofits cohort in 2022, and they really decided to think outside of their box, outside of their normal kind of thinking, and how to leverage their existing resources and assets to fill a community need. So they opened a brand new daycare facility to support their community and their staff with much needed childcare services, right? So they saw the need, demand, and what they could utilize. So the next revenue strategy in the honeycomb is assets. So assets present both a simple and more complex opportunity. In like fee for service and social enterprise, they have varying levels of risk, which everything has risk. Not doing something is a risk. So it's really thinking about how we mitigate risk. So intentionally creating long-term organizational assets can present big opportunity for building financial resilience, right? So traditionally, assets are generally thought of as financial items that show up on your organizational balance sheet. But there are many important assets inside and outside your organization that are not likely to appear on your balance sheet. Okay, so what are they? What brings economic, social value, cultural value, natural value, community value, right? So, what are some examples? It might be your staff and volunteers, your space, whether that's virtual or real, whether you own it, whether you lease it, whether you're talking about the space in the park that sits right beside you. You have access to space. And so that is an asset. Your networks, your relationships, your brand, and your goodwill, could be one of the most important assets that nonprofits have. Even our waste streams. I've seen thriving nonprofits, alumni utilize their waste streams as new revenue diversification strategies, and also, an environmental win. So it's really thinking in different ways. Tools, equipment. It might be combining your existing assets or sharing them with other organizations who also have assets that we want. So it's really just taking a broader view of assets and what do you have that you could utilize for impact and a revenue source. Asset strategies, of course, might range from the ones we were talking about, also looking at social purpose real estate, and that kind of investment really supports your impact and your financial sustainability long into the future. An example, Shelburne Community Kitchen, great organization, really works in food security for low income families and single families. And so they were able to, first off, get a new building, 4 times the size of their original location, raise the capital for the renovations, and they really are able to increase their overall services by 225%, which is incredible, right? And this has been going now for a few years. So it's incredible to see it in action. Partnerships. It's another revenue strategy that you can explore. And what I'm talking about here is not, hi, can I get $5,000 for an event? These are really deep win-win partnerships. And what does that look like? And the key, I think, is sitting in a place of understanding the enormous value that your nonprofit actually brings to potential partners, right? In the form of brand trust, networks, and reach. So the key here when you're looking at this strategy, A, is to sit into this place of understanding how much value you bring into a partnership, and B, how do you identify the right partners and know how to package and present that value. So creating, those win-win partnerships, right? First thing is really understanding your value, understanding your brand and reach. And that is from all the different areas that you engage with people, right? Identifying the right partnership alignment. Sometimes, there's so many different, it might be regional, it might be mission based, it might be growth objectives, right? You can learn a lot from potential partners by looking at their strategic plan of where they're trying to head as well, and see that alignment for yourself. Crafting that really effective value proposition. So that's really understanding the value, that brand, that reach, that alignment. And so having that, elevator pitch in your back pocket to be able to really present your value proposition. And I would say negotiate and manage successful partnerships, right? That's really important. It's not connecting once a year. It's really like thinking about how you're going to communicate, how you're going to manage, what happens if things go wrong, and really having someone hold those relationships in your organization can make for a lot longer term and successful partnerships. And this is something, this is something we really work on, is really, with organizations, what is those right partners? How do you craft that value proposition? Design those partnership proposals, manage those relationships. And so, because the real goal is for you to build mission aligned and financially beneficial partnerships. Our final revenue strategy is leverage. It's the most subtle, I would say, but it is also very powerful. So I would say looking at leverage in a broader sense, sort of like we do with assets. So leverage for thriving nonprofits means asking, how can we align everything we do, not just our programs, but operations, to increase revenue, impact, and equity? So let's consider the concept of our organization's alignment, right? Towards impact. So this is aligning towards impact. We know our programs, our services, and activities create impact and support our mission. But let's consider that as 25% of the impact we can achieve. Then we can look at things like our operation, our employment practices. How do we create greater impact by introducing things like inclusive and diverse hiring, paying the living wage, wellness days, other benefits to our employees? We're seeing now, some organizations are thinking about pensions at the other end. So how do you align your employment practices deeply with the values you're trying to do in your organization? Purchasing power. We all buy things. Are you buying local, choosing social enterprises, prioritizing diverse suppliers like Indigenous or women-led businesses? So imagine if every dollar you spent on equipment, printing, tech, cleaning, consultants, all reinforced your values. And then we really want to think about banking and investment, right? Like where your money is, it is then being put out into the world. So it actually really matters. What do you bank with a bank that is investing in the problems you're trying to solve? Are you investing in a credit union that is very community focused and is bringing money back into the community? It's really, and where are your investments? Are you investing in impact investment funds? Or again, is it out in the world creating the problems you're trying to solve? So it's really thinking strategically about where your money sits, because it's being used on your behalf. It's being used by somebody else to do other things. So when all those activities combine, your organization becomes even more impactful. So choosing the right strategies. So how do you think about what's the right strategy for you? So I always think it's about what's the right revenue mix, right? Time, right? Is it a short-term strategy, medium, long-term? It's going to look different. Culture, where's your organization sitting right now with culture? Do you need time to sort of build that culture and risk about money and risk muscle in your organization? Well, that might be a longer term strategy, right? Risk and return, what's your ROI on both impact and financial? The strengths and resources that you have in your organization already, what makes sense to just move forward? And the impact that you want to create. And that can be in many facets about the community you serve or your operations inside and the people who work for you, right? So that's a lot about a lot of the strategies, right? So you start with the mindset shift, you think about your risk and your limiting beliefs, you move into the different 9 different kinds of strategies that organizations can bring in. And I think it's like you get a plan together and then you go to implement. So this is where the Thriving Nonprofits journey can come in. So it's really around this 3 prong, the learning, that's that deeper dive, that's that cohort we were sort of talking about. It's about the plan part, right? Plan that's tailored to your organization. Um, Example, Starfish. Starfish Canada came in, they took the planning, that learning phase, and their whole organization shifted, right? It went from wasn't sure where to go to, we all of a sudden have $1 million+ budget. So it's very incredible. They didn't need any other support after that. Some organizations do, right? So if that excites you or you want to think about that, I will say, because I know people have lots of questions on this and it's important, that our main cohort program is a 4-month experience. It happens in the spring, which is happening right now, and there will be a fall intake as well. And so that's exciting. There's about 100 organizations that are going through our spring one right now, and we'll be opening applications for the fall, probably more in that June area. But you can get on the wait list through the website. You can also, if you want to just start in our self-paced program, there's a 50% off because you're here today, which is so awesome. So that code is workshop, and I'm sure these details will be sent out with the recording. So that's that learning piece, right? So then I think about activation, right? And sometimes a percentage of organizations really need, there's great value in bringing that support, outside support into their organization. So that might be on leadership development, that might be on business planning, social enterprise development, impact measurement support, strategic thinking. It might be ongoing coaching. It might be bringing someone in to do financial modeling on an idea you have. I really think about, when I think about consulting and coaching, it's, where is the time that you want to develop these capacities in your organization? So that might be around coaching, or where does it really just make sense to bring in someone else to do like a financial modeling and social enterprise development, and really that sort of walk with sort of support, but they can do some of the work. And that can be around capacity or different expertise, or that it just makes sense. You want someone else's eye on it. And so, we work with tons of board members, executive, program staff, all of it to strengthen your resilience and impact. Oh, this is great. You can book a call if you want to talk about Stephanie, who was supposed to be with us today. Unfortunately was sick. And so she's one of the people you could talk to. We'll share the link in the follow-up email, but you can just book a call from the website. Like, that's fine, a contact or a call, whatever you want, to sort of see where you're at in your organization and what makes sense for your org. And, of course, once you have that revenue plan and you're ready to, I would say, investment ready for those ones that need it, let's say you're purchasing an asset, then that third part of the journey comes in, and that's investment. And so that's really thinking about flexible, values-aligned capital to help you grow and scale, right? It might be financing, revenue generation program, a social enterprise, asset purchase. They all require upfront capital to support that sort of launch, growth, or scale phase, right? So at Thriving Nonprofits, we believe deeply that accessing capital should be empowering, non extractive, right? Relationship driven, not transactional, and really focused on impact, long term sustainability, and mission alignment. So I would say there's flexible financing across our country. There's some great social finance ecosystem actors that are listed here. In Thriving Nonprofits, our impact investment fund is Thrive Impact Fund. And yeah, happy to have a conversation at any time if you're thinking or ready. But there's tons around our country as well, depending where you're coming from. And I would say I know at Thrive Impact Fund, and I can only speak for us, is we really we are a fund that can invest in nonprofits and charities. We're unique like that, and we really think about how do we remove barriers to nonprofits to access funding? Because we are, again, one of the reasons we co-founded this fund is I was an executive director that wanted to purchase a facility and I was not able to access traditional financing. And it did not make sense. And so we never want that to happen to other executive directors or other organizations that are looking to create incredible community assets that will stay in our community for perpetuity, or scaling programs, or whatever that sort of looks like in initiatives. So reach out to us or any one of those to have a conversation. Oh my goodness, that is a lot. So I think I'm going to stop this slideshow and look forward to diving into some questions.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Christy, for a jam-packed um, webinar. We had a lot of questions, and special thanks to Rob for answering so many of those. Feel free to jump in, Rob, if you think there's any particular questions you want for Christy to address, but maybe we can start with some of the pre-submitted questions. So we have a lot of smaller and medium-sized charities on the call.
Okay.
Somebody asked, how does a small nonprofit diversify revenue streams when they're strapped for resources, particularly with few staff?
Yeah, it's a great question. And I would say that how we think about it, I'm going to think about it through the cohort program here really quickly, is how we think about it is that organizations might go through the 9 strategies and identify which ones would work, but they are going to start with the lower hanging fruit, I would say, that don't take as much capacity. They might just look at their space and be like, oh, we have this one room we could start renting out, or they might look at where they, even as simple as where they put a donation jar, or how they think about fee for service. I would say if you're getting demand coming in for other places, like I'm one of our alumni was a law, they worked in justice and law, and they had a grant that was always catering to nonprofits. So they were a real small organization. But they would also have lawyers who had to keep up with their professional designation come and ask them to, um, be able to get some of the training and stuff at that. And so they started charging the law offices and kept it free for the nonprofits. And so just, thinking about maybe what you already have and what are some small tweaks and ways that you can begin to do that. Is there any way that I would think about my assets in the board? Like, have you done, what are all the skills they have or access to different networks they might have? Start to think about it with the capacity that you already have. So yeah, it takes time. And then once you start generating that revenue, maybe there's a potential to bring in another person that allows them to really be a revenue generating role for your organization. Yeah.
Awesome. Yeah, that's a great place to start. I think, like, going through my mind, I know there's a lot of churches in our audience, like renting out community rooms for people is a great place to start. Moving on to another question. This one's quite interesting. How can we help the public see that nonprofits can earn profit through social enterprise to support their mission? So they don't want to maybe make donors feel turned off because they're charging fees for their programs.
Yeah, another another great question and the complexity of our sector. I think that because traditionally, if we think of our board members and, volunteer and things like that, they are the general public, that's, your wider public as well. And they come from a place of love and they've joined our boards, in a place of love. But I think helping them understand that um, times have changed and like we can't exist in the same way. I think it's storytelling, being really clear. So if you have a social enterprise, the research says that an organization, because I know that was specifically on social enterprise, the research states that people will come to your social enterprise the first time because it's a social enterprise, right? But you need to be providing really good services and products, and then they'll keep coming, right? So what's the quality that you're able to give? Is there storytelling so that they can see, oh, I came in for a coffee, and this is really helping youth leaving care, or this is really helping ever active schools, right? So one organization that I know, they had like they put their logo, they made a deal with a coffee shop to put their logo onto the coffee bags and stuff like that, that could start to raise awareness of the different stories of where that money was really helping. So think about how you get that message out, and there's a lot of different ways to do that with the general public. Yeah.
Yeah, I really like that, like changing the narrative. I think what went through my mind is like centering the amount of more impacts that you could have if you're able to, not ask for permission every time. Um,
Exactly, exactly. And I think people want to support and they do. They just need that connection made for them, right? And so being, unapologetically bold that like when we do raise resources, it allows us to help our community more in these ways.
Perfect. What is the most effective strategy for engaging with impact investors? Your thoughts?
Getting to a place where you're investment ready, I would think like a lender. What are the kind of information they need? That this is where I think engaging with some different impact investment funds would help. You can call them, reach out to them. Some of them have different kinds of info session webinar type things. I know we have organizations, I can speak for Thrive Impact Fund. We have organizations that just reach out to us on the contact form on the website, just ask questions. I know another impact investment fund, they like people just to call them really early. Like it's never too early to have a conversation. Like for them, they're like, if you want to purchase an asset in 3 years, we're okay to know about it now, right? And I think, and this is where I think sometimes if you can utilize, um, I would say consultants and coaches that really understand impact investment, then that they may help you be able to bring, some of the performers and different things you might need.
Perfect. I think this is the last pre-submitted question we have before I turn it over to Rob. So we see opportunities for diverse project funding, but how is sustainable, like ideally operational funding possible?
I would say it's the greatest possibility that we are seeing organizations dive into is revenue diversification. That is where your operations are sustainable. There is a number of funders that are, shifting a bit into operational grants, and I value and appreciate that, and that's fantastic. And so that's a great shift. Um,
True. Yeah, the
when
webinar
you
was
have
basically the
stuff that you
answer.
control, though, like again, those kind of things again are out of your control. Does that change in the future? It used to be that there was operational grants and now it's project, so I do think that your best security is always on creating diversification in your own organization. That is the solution.
Mhm. Perfect. Rob, were there any questions that you saw coming through that you wanted to highlight to the group?
I've been doing my best to hammer out responses and hopefully have been sending that to the whole chat. I think we're at time. There's been some great questions answered though and asked. And I would just say just reach out to us. We're happy to talk, hello at thrivingnonprofits.ca, jump on our site, book a call, or send us a contact form. We want to hear from people. So please do reach out.
Awesome. Thank you so much to our speaker and also Rob for answering all of those questions. Thank you so much to the Thriving Nonprofits team and all of you for taking the time to join us on this webinar. I hope to see you on future webinars. Um, at the end of the webinar, there will be a short survey and it's super helpful to me. If you can just provide us with any feedback that you have. Thank you again. Christy, do you have any closing remarks you'd like to share?
Well, I really appreciate people. It gives me hope and excitement. Years ago, a lot of organizations wouldn't have looked at revenue diversification, and now we're seeing hundreds and hundreds and hundreds continue to look at it. So our sector is really shifting, and it brings me incredible hope. This webinar was one of the highest, I think, or the highest that Canada Helps has ever done. And there's a reason for that, is because there's incredible wisdom in the sector, and it's time now. We have the tools and the expertise that incredible wisdom can utilize, and we're transforming the sector. So I'm just really grateful for everyone for coming and for just the work they do in community. And Cindy, for you and the team at Canada Helps, for all you bring to the sector and for hosting these kind of webinars. So thank you. And of
Thank
course
you
to
so
Rob for answering all those questions. I really appreciate Rob dearly. So
Awesome. Thank you so much, everybody. We'll be following up with everyone with the resources mentioned, a replay. I hope everyone takes care.
bye.
Thanks, everyone.